Welcome to part 6 of the Ultimate Sunrise on the Reaping Deep Dive. I'm covering chapters 17 and 18, scoping out all of the symbolism and connections to the rest of the Hunger Games books, emphasis on Suzanne Collins' books, not the film adaptations. In this deep dive, there are no spoilers beyond the specific Sunrise on the Reaping chapters I'm discussing, so while I'm discussing chapter 17, I reveal nothing about chapter 18. Though, reminder, everything else from the other books in the series is fair game, since this is a prequel. The whole fun is that it's in context of what we know from the other books, and significant elements of the plot in Sunrise were written in the trilogy, especially Catching Fire, and I use that context in this analysis. Just want to make that clear because if you haven't read the trilogy in a long time, you may have forgotten that in Catching Fire we have a description of Haymitch's games, and in Mockingjay we find stuff about his family, and if you forgot about that, then you might feel like these are plot elements that are new in Sunrise, but they're not. They're context for this prequel. With that said, each chapter review is organized into 7 sections. There's the recap, character analysis, symbols and themes, lore and world building, possible foreshadowing, series connections, and notable quotes. If you'd like to watch or listen to this without any interruptions, the ad-free version is on my Patreon with the option to download it as a podcast. All of my long-form videos are available that way. Last thing, my content focuses on the fictional world of Panem, but there are hungry people in the real world, and food banks could always use more donations and volunteers, so please, I encourage you to contribute if you're able to do so. I have some links of where to donate in the description. And with that, my buddies and sweethearts, let's dive into it. Chapter 17, Recap. It begins with the cannon blast confirming without a doubt that Lulu is dead. To express his anguish, Haymitch whispers to the game makers via Lulu's ear implant, "You did this to her. This is who you are. Murderers." The hovercraft comes to collect her body, and Haymitch tries to take her out of their reach. He's sick at the thought of what the Capitol will do with her body, since they can't send both hers and Luella's back to District 12. So Haymitch carries her to a dense area in the trees, and the claw from the hovercraft can't get through. He wonders if by running off with Lulu's body, he's coming off as an exciting rascal or a treasonous rebel, if it'll make it on air and or just piss off the game makers and get him into trouble. Not knowing what to do, he and the game makers get into a standoff. And then these blue mutt butterflies with tiny golden lightning bolts decorating its wings appear, and they have stingers that give excruciating electric shocks, as if the butterflies have mini tasers in their stingers. One stings Haymitch on the back of his hand that cradles Lulu's face. He screams and drops Lulu, temporarily blinded by the pain, and as soon as he can see again, another one stings him on the cheek. Ouch. Raw panic consumes Haymitch, and he runs into the woods as a swarm of hundreds of butterflies chase and sting him so intensely he freezes for a moment after each one. It feels never-ending, and eventually he falls into a gas plant berm. Thinking fast, he grabs the flint striker and rock and starts making some sparks of his own, sending showers of them into the blossoms. 5-foot flames erupt off the plants, engulfing the butterflies, and there's a win for Haymitch because it turns out his shirt is fireproof. Most of the butterflies were reduced to crispy skeletons, and the rest flew away. Their stings didn't leave any wounds whatsoever on Haymitch. All that's left is the memory of the terrible pain. He wants to follow the retreating butterflies to their mutt portal berm, but knows he needs to play this carefully to avoid jeopardizing the plan. He covers up his true motive with retaliation, grabbing a branch that caught fire like he's trying to torch the buggers. He sees a berm labeled Butterfly Bush slide open as if on tracks, leaving a 6-foot wide gulf right down the middle of the circle. The butterflies are going down this mutt portal, and Haymitch runs over to incinerate some of them as they're going down to play off his vengeance shtick. The berm starts sliding shut, and as if in a last-ditch effort, he lunges at the final mutt, wedging the branch between the lips of the hatch. It clamps shut, crushing the wood, but leaving an 1/8 of an inch opening in the seam. He goes back to get his things by the bee balm, and, even though he doesn't look like he's hurt, he's twitchy and exhausted. And having completed his tasks for the day of making fire and finding a mutt berm, Haymitch climbs a tree by the butterfly bush, sets up his hammock, and eats some hard-boiled eggs and apples. So about these eggs, I saw all the feedback on the last video about how people leave hard-boiled eggs unrefrigerated for extended periods and it's fine, and the reason the USDA say it's unsafe is because the US processes eggs differently from other countries, making them more vulnerable to bacteria and spoilage. I apologize for my ignorance on this topic, and I'll shut up about Haymitch's eggs for now. He can enjoy his hard-boiled eggs safely. The fallen tributes of the second day of the games are just Loop from District 1 and Lulu pictured with her snake. 5 careers gone, 17 newcomers, 26 left overall. Before Haymitch falls asleep, he wonders how Maisley's doing and if he'll ever see her again. Later, he wakes up to his first sponsor gift, a dozen white rolls still warm from the oven, a block of orange cheese, a bottle of grape juice, and a long-stemmed glass goblet. Fancy! Bread and cheese are pretty commonplace for sponsor gifts, but this grape juice and goblet are quite glamorous. Haymitch voices his thanks to his fellow rascals from the capital and feels refreshed after his little meal. He takes a moment to analyze why, from the capital sponsor's perspective, he's earned this valuable gift and determines he's shown he's resourceful and clearly selfish enough to win. Though he is concerned about the district folks thinking poorly of him, especially his brother. A few hours pass as Haymitch stays in this hammock waiting for Ampert to show up. He climbs higher in the tree, looking through his binoculars at the expansive arena, and thinks he sees the edge of it since it looks blurry in the distance. Then he spots a grim-faced Ampert with 2 sunflower tokens walking towards the woods from the cornucopia. Haymitch goes towards him as he conjures up a reason for his rascal character to be friendly with little Ampert. He can't tip off the game makers to the plan, so he's going to act like this rascal wants an update. Ampert gives Haymitch a big hug, which he can't help but return, and Ampert's cover story is that he was sent to find him because the newcomers need him. Haymitch reiterates he's too dangerous to be around and that Lulu found him and died shortly after. Then he offers to trade some of his food for information. Ampert eats and catches Haymitch up on what happened. So Welly figured out the arena was poisonous, as Haymitch guessed she would, and though some of them were poisoned, they survived with the help of a big bottle of the syrup antidote from the cornucopia. Perhaps this is the same antidote that Snow uses when he's poisoned himself. Ampert gives Haymitch Wyatt's token and says that Panache killed him and 5 others with a sword. Marit from 4 is skilled with a trident, and Silka uses an axe. Turns out Maisley was separated from the newcomers during the bloodbath, and they haven't seen her since, and the careers followed them to the mountain. After this little update, Haymitch and Ampert are just chilling for a little while. They're drinking juice, they're staring at the gorgeous arena. Just a couple of guys being dudes. Ampert is really on top of how to hide what they're doing from the cameras. He asks Haymitch to show him around the woods, and off they go. They end the tour at the butterfly bush, and Ampert notices the branch wedged in the portal. Ampert asks if he could rest here with Haymitch for a while since it's supposedly relatively safe there since the butterflies aren't a huge threat. While Ampert naps, Haymitch gathers wood and kindling to prep for the bombing and thinks about how he'll die carrying out the plan. Super fun and casual. He thinks, hoping for something better could be dangerous. It could blind me to the reality of my situation. I remember how Mama always said, where there's life, there's hope. But from where I'm sitting, hope seems a lot like white liquor. It can fool you in the short run, but like it's not, you'll end up paying for it twice. End of chapter 17. I'm just thinking of Haymitch getting into the cycle of drinking himself into oblivion and then waking up hungover and sick every day. You would think a mildish chapter would mean I could breeze through my notes, but absolutely not. Once I start writing these deep dives, it's like I'm sucked into a wormhole and I can't come out until my stomach is growling and my brain is melting. I feel like Katniss post-Tracker Jacker attack. Fortunately, that is when Green Chef comes to the rescue. Wow, that transition was smooth. Peeta would be so proud. If you also have difficulty getting nutritious meals together when you're tired and busy, Green Chef is a game changer. You get wholesome, yummy meals on the table fast without having to think too hard. There are over 80 weekly menu options, and you can customize based on your needs, like plant-based, gluten-free, high protein, and more. Meal kits come with farmers market quality organic produce and pre-prepped ingredients that eliminate the whole "what do I buy?" I and how do I chop it? Mental spiral. I made their Italian white bean and kale soup last night and it hit the spot. Enough for 2 people. Well, except the garlic bread. You can never have enough garlic bread. And special shout out to the sweet and spicy orange cauliflower bowls. So good. Anyways, it's such a relief to have one less thing to think about while still eating delicious meals that make me feel good. And Green Chef makes that all possible, and I think it will help you too. Head to greenchef.com or click the link below and use code 50bread to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Green Chef box plus 20% off for 2 months. That's code 50bread at greenchef.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Green Chef box plus 20% off for 2 months. Code 50bread at greenchef.com. Thank you, Green Chef, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into it. Character analysis. Haymitch. He has such intense familial love, I can't take it. He can't surrender Luella or Lulu to capital hands without a fight or without them feeling loved, and he repeatedly reflects on how all the tributes have families who love them. It was so important to him that the last person who touches Lulu would be him. It would be someone who cares about her. Whereas for Katniss, family is still hugely important to her, but she is focused on protecting her own family and anyone who she considers family, like the Hawthorns. I'm not saying either is better than the other, they're just different. Katniss tries to put walls up to avoid caring deeply for people she isn't able to protect. Haymitch doesn't have those walls up, at least not when he was a teenager. Since the games began, Haymitch has been conscious of the story he is telling to the game makers and the audience. He's very aware of the part he needs to play in order to have the best chance to pull off the explosion. It makes me think about Peeta with the careers. He made his lover boy capital persona and needed to get the careers to believe it was a ruse, but also keep the audience believing he is the lover boy still, and he's just tricking the careers. Haymitch made his lovable rascal persona for the capital audience, and the newcomers know him as his true caring self, and then there's Ampert, who he has this secret rebel plan relationship with. Different topic, but Haymitch is so confident that he'll get sponsor-funded food. Yes, Plutarch and his mentors told him he got some sponsors before the games, but I was a little surprised by Haymitch's certainty about gifts. Katniss wasn't so trusting. In chapter 16, Haymitch thought, bet my sponsors are sending some dollars my way too. Since Mags and Wyrus know I've got Lulu to feed now, I hope it's enough for something to complement our potatoes. And in this chapter, he thinks, surely sponsors will enable my mentors to replenish my pantry soon. Perhaps his faith in being sent food comes from growing up with more food security than Katniss and just not being a hunter. Haymitch didn't shoulder the burden of putting food on the table like Katniss. And also, Haymitch isn't planning to live very long in the arena, so rationing his food and making it last isn't that important to him. But still, his certainty that he'd get sent stuff is interesting. On to Ampert. Haymitch's description of him hurts my heart. He thinks this when they're hugging. I'm surprised by how small he feels because he's such a take charge kind of kid, but he's only about Sid's size and plenty scared. Even the brightest brain can't think its way out of being trapped in the arena. Hey, Haymitch, have you ever considered shutting up? Ampert is so sweet, and he felt guilty for not sharing the food Haymitch gave him with the other newcomers too. And he got choked up talking about everything he saw in the bloodbath. He's so traumatized. Symbols and themes. I'm backtracking a little here. I want to talk more about Lulu. Back in the chapter 14 discussion, I asked for y'all to share your insights about the symbolism of Lulu blowing out candles and eagerly smelling the smoke. So let's talk about it. Sam Sherwood 8332 shared that they thought that Lulu breathing in the smoke foreshadowed her death, which makes so much sense. She was burying her face in the red blossoms of the Mutt bee balm flowers, breathing in their scent, much like the way she blew out the candles, greedily inhaling the smoke curling off the burned wicks. As this commenter wrote, in both of these instances, Lulu is leaning into a familiar and comforting scent. But notably, in both cases, the scent is emanating from a dangerous source. Fire from the smoke and poison gas from the flowers. Thank you, Sam, for catching that. I also loved what Sarah Van Orden 670 had to say about the irony of Lulu blowing out candles, since in the series, fire is tied to the flames of rebellion. Sarah commented that Lulu was a capital mutt and she was blowing out the flames of the rebellion that Haymitch plans because she's made by the capital. Great point. And I want to examine why Lulu was sent by the game makers to find Haymitch. We don't know their exact plans for why they did this, but overall it was to endanger and mess with Haymitch. She is a liability. The game makers could see where Haymitch was because of his tracker and easily give Lulu directions through her audio plant, like walk up that hill, turn right, look under that bush. Easy peasy. It doesn't seem like the game makers had the ability to or intended to make Lulu attack him ever. I'm imagining they could have been able to pump some sort of stimulating drug through her device to make her behave violently if they really wanted to, but even if that was the case and the game makers chose to do that, odds are Haymitch would win in a fight against her, just given their size differences. Or I guess if she had a weapon. Anyway, she doesn't fight him, so who cares? I don't believe she was sent to find him to attack him Mutt style. Just having Lulu with Haymitch makes it more difficult for him to stay alive. He has to simultaneously look out for threats and keep watch over Lulu at all times. Plus, his food and water supplies dwindle more quickly because she's sharing them with her, and she's very hungry. She doesn't have the ability to be a mutual, helpful ally to him. If Mutts or careers showed up, then Haymitch could end up dying trying to protect her, like Wyatt likely did. If careers were nearby and the game makers wanted to draw them towards Haymitch, they could send Lulu one of those painful, high-pitched noises so she'd scream, giving away their location. We saw that when Lulu was with Haymitch, she went asleep suddenly and couldn't be woken up, seemingly due to being drugged, and there's multiple reasons why the game makers would do this. If she's asleep, that keeps her and Haymitch where they are until they let her wake up. Haymitch notes he can't carry her, not in this condition, since he's weak from the water poisoning. During Lulu's nap, Haymitch builds a fire, cooks potatoes, and once they're ready, he wakes up Lulu, so she's able to be woken up at this point. She's not bogged down by sedatives. Then they leave the area and continue walking. Perhaps the game makers wanted to stall Haymitch so he'd get to some other area they wanted him to be to attack him later than originally projected, or they were keeping him in that spot because they could send Mutts on him there if they chose. I think that makes sense as a plan. In case nothing interesting was happening, they need to make the programming eventful. They have tributes and Mutts ready to go in this area. Snow had told Haymitch he's going to die in that arena for his behavior with Luella, so we can assume the game makers are under orders to make that happen. It's just a matter of when and how they will kill him, if another tribute doesn't. But while Lulu was sleeping and Haymitch was cooking those potatoes, a cannon went off in the distance. Another tribute died, providing sufficient entertainment for the time being. I think that death is what spared Haymitch from being attacked by Mutts here. It bought him some more time. Did the game makers plan for Lulu to die from smelling those flowers? I don't think they ordered her to run for those, but they didn't seem to have any intention of stopping her from poisoning herself in the arena. Haymitch was the one stopping her from eating poisoned apples. But maybe when Lulu was on her quest to find Haymitch, the game makers deterred her from the poison through her earpiece. And then the game makers let Lulu fall victim to the toxic bee bomb so she could painfully die from it for their gruesome show, with the added drama of Haymitch's reaction. Then they can save whatever they'll do to Haymitch for another plot point, trying to get as much material as possible out of these kids. I don't think the game makers anticipated Haymitch stepping in and removing her medical pump to shorten her suffering, because they wouldn't be able to show that on camera, since a tribute having a medical device like that wouldn't make sense. Plus, making Haymitch watch Lulu go through this is a way to psychologically torment him. Another reminder that he is being punished for what he did with Luella's body, and while he isn't the reason Lulu was created, he is made to feel responsible for her agony. However, the game makers also could have anticipated the possibility that when Lulu found Haymitch, he'd ditch her or worse. He even acknowledged caring for her isn't exactly in line with his rascal bent on winning character. If Haymitch tried to get Lulu to leave him alone, that could be quite a spectacle, since the game makers could make her react in an extreme way and chase after him, possibly drawing in other tributes. And if Haymitch went so far as killed her, that would be a riveting twist. I figure some sponsors would like that ruthlessness, but many would be turned off by it. To the districts, this would make Haymitch look very bad. The image of a strong, older teenage boy killing a frail little girl from his own district is just brutal. It sows distrust among the community in 12 and makes 12 look savage to the rest of the country. And the capital people already see the tributes as savages, so that serves their loyalist agenda. Claws and jaws. I'm referring to the four-pronged claw that drops down from hovercrafts to collect tributes' bodies. In the trilogy, and also here in Sunrise, Haymitch refers to it as a claw, but also as jaws. I can hear the Jaws music. I hadn't thought of it as a jaw until now, but the symbolism works for both. As a claw, it creepily resembles an arcade crane game claw machine. It works for the capital outlook that the tributes are trivial, they're just pieces in a game. It's ironic that in the game, a player wins by successfully maneuvering the claw to grab some sort of prize, like an animal plushie, and in the Hunger Games, it's the capital grabbing the bodies of players who lost the games. The dead tributes don't truly lose against the victor, they lose to the capital, the real enemy, and victors don't truly win either. This is the rare instance where there's some dialogue in the films I love so much I forget it's not canon to the books. It's in the Catching Fire movie where Katniss says,
"Nobody decent ever wins the game."
Nobody ever wins the games, period. There are survivors. There's no winners.
The closest thing we get to that in the Catching Fire book is Katniss thinking, no wonder I won the games. No decent person ever does. Anyways, the fallen tributes are scooped up in the Capitol's claws like a hawk snatching its prey. Haymitch wonders what to do with Lulu after he realizes he got himself into trouble by carrying her off. Should he just stay put and wait for the claw to break through and then helpfully place her in its jaws? So it's a claw and a jaw, her body being taken away and eradicated, swallowed up in the jaws. All the fallen tributes' lives have been consumed by the Capitol, but with Lulu, there's an extra layer to this consumption. The Capitol captured this girl, ripped away her identity, violated her body, spat her out into the arena, and once they got their use out of her, they gobbled her back up. Her body will not be sent home like other tributes. The Capitol will dispose of her. Haymitch speculates if they'll bury her or incinerate her body and leave no trace. Unfortunately, I think the latter is more likely. Oh, Lulu. Moving on to 6 feet. There's been several things listed as being 6 feet in length or height in the book so far. Famously, people are buried 6 feet underground, the depth of a grave. And Lucy Gray's interview song, she wrote the lyrics.
It's sooner than later that I'm 6 feet under.
It's a common saying in the English language. Need some water. Gotta minimize the comments saying how my voice sounds awful. No one's forcing you to listen to this. Here's all the things so far that are 6 feet in Sunrise. Silka from District 1 is over 6 feet tall, and we know from Catching Fire, Haymitch's final battle of the game is with a girl from District 1. And the first day of the 50th games, the other girl from 1, Carrot, died, so that makes Silka that final girl confirmed. And she is sent to her grave from her axe boomeranging off the force field, according to Catching Fire at least. The snake Lulu befriended was 6 foot, and she is looking for that snake when she finds the flowers that kill her. Here in chapter 17, the fully opened Mutt portal is 6 foot wide, and Haymitch has 6 feet of fuse for blowing up the water tank. So his plan is to go underground through a 6 foot hole opening, and he expects to die down there. If I do this thing right, blow open the tank and set off a flood, likely it will take me out. I mean, 6 feet of fuse does not allow for much of an escape window. If the explosion doesn't finish me off, surely the water will. We know Haymitch isn't gonna die. He's in the trilogy. But I'd say this foreshadows someone dying in this explosion plan. And since we're already on the topic of fuses, want to note that in the rebel plot in the third quell, Beetee says how the wire coil they use will burn, but not until the current has passed through it. It will act something like a fuse, in fact, except the electricity will travel along it. So in the second quell, his plan had a literal fuse, and the third had a fuse-like mechanism. Beetee's plan in the third quell definitely went awry, though ultimately it worked with Katniss's help. We'll see what happens here with Haymitch. Also, if you have the series in another language or just any non-American published edition, do they use the Imperial system or is it swapped for the metric? Please leave a comment if you have an alt edition. I'm so curious, especially if in Lucy Gray's song they changed the 6 feet underline. Next, rainbows. I talked a bunch about rainbows in part 5. In the series, they are often used to contrast natural goodness with the darker sides of human nature. Through his binoculars, Haymitch saw a shimmering rainbow over the snowy mountain. Feels very Wizard of Oz, over the rainbow to this colorful land. There's major overlap between Dorothy's journey in Oz to Alice in Wonderland. We know from Catching Fire that this picturesque mountain erupts in a volcano that wipes out another dozen players. Placing a rainbow over it adds to the deceptive beauty of the arena. Lore and world building. Grape juice. Haymitch says that in District 12, grape juice is reserved for birthdays and wedding punch. This is news. In the trilogy, grapes and wine are mentioned, but never grape juice. The closest we have is in Ballad. Corio has grape punch in the Academy's dining hall after Arachne's funeral. He spilled some of it and wiped it up with an Academy napkin, and he used that napkin to wrap up Sejanus's leftovers to give to Lucy Gray. Taking food from the dining hall was illegal, and his DNA from that napkin was used to trace him to the handkerchief he put in the snake tank. I don't know if this relates to Haymitch's grape juice. If you have any thoughts, please share them. There could also be a religious symbolism to this grape juice, possible foreshadowing. Facing the McCoys. Haymitch strongly believes the McCoys can tell Lulu was not their daughter, and they must be incredibly heartbroken and confused. He thinks, at least that's one terrible conversation I've been spared. He most likely won't be, though, since we know Haymitch will make it back to 12. So this possibly foreshadows him having a terrible conversation with the McCoys about Luella. Next up, raising a glass. Haymitch getting this glass goblet and then thanking his sponsors with a toast somewhat foreshadows his future alcoholism. He's already been publicly defined as a bootlegger, and this just adds to that image that becomes his reality as a mentor. There's also a weak series connection element here. You know, Katniss thanked District 11 for sending her the bread. Haymitch is thanking the Capitol for sending him this. They're very different situations, though. Ampert's fate. Another ominous thought from Haymitch here. Looking at him, I can't help thinking that all the little ones seem to end up with me. Luella, Lulu, Ampert. I can't keep a one of them safe. Why do they flock to me? And Haymitch holds off on cooking potatoes thinking, I'll leave them for Ampert, who stands a better chance of surviving our mission. Haymitch, if you wish for it, the opposite will likely happen. We've seen how it goes in this book. Series connections. Bad ears. Haymitch refers to the ear which houses Lulu's audio transmitter implant as her bad ear twice. The first time is when he asks her how she found him in chapter 16. She taps her bad ear. Find Haymitch, she says. In this chapter, he calls it the bad ear before he whispers into it to talk to the game makers. I was trying to see if Katniss ever referred to her own briefly deafened ear as bad. She didn't, but kept calling the other one her good ear, so that makes the other one her bad ear, right? Katniss's hearing issue was in her left ear. I couldn't find any specifics about which ear Lulu's was. When Haymitch first noticed something off about Lulu's ear, he said she was pawing at her ear, and Katniss said something like that too. I find myself pawing at my left ear periodically, trying to clean away whatever deadens its ability to collect sounds. We know Lulu could hear the game makers talking to her in her bad ear, but I wonder if, like Katniss, she couldn't hear normal things out of it, or maybe it was heavily muffled. What do you think? Willow trees. Haymitch takes Lulu's body to a clump of willows, and they're temporarily shielded from the Capitol hovercraft there. In the first chapter, Haymitch notes that he and Hattie have a makeshift supply depot at a bare patch of ground concealed by the drooping boughs of a willow tree. So willows seem to be this comforting, safe place. In the 74th games, the first tree Katniss sleeps in for the night is a willow. She carefully chose this tree. A willow, not terribly tall, but set in a clump of other willows, offering concealment in those long, flowing tresses. And most importantly, willows are featured in the Meadow Song Lullaby, which Katniss sang to Rue while she died, and in the epilogue to her own children. Here's a few key lines that apply here with this protective willow tree. Deep in the meadow, under a willow, a bed of grass, a soft green pillow. Deep in the meadow, hidden far away, a cloak of leaves, a moonbeam ray. Here it's safe, here it's warm, here the daisies guard you from every harm. Rue was from District 11, like Lulu. Well,
Peeta.
Lucy Gray also sang this on that pleasant day by the lake with the Covey and Corio. Butterflies. There's a lot going on with these butterfly mutts symbolically and connection-wise. First of all, they're almost the same electric blue of District 3's outfits and with a pattern of gold lightning bolts on the wings. District 3's industry is technology, which is in line with these tasering butterflies. It's possible they were created by 3. And in the third quell, BD from District 3 is in charge of harnessing lightning to blow out the force field. In this second quell, Haymitch found the mutt portal housing the butterflies, which he was instructed to locate by Beetee. Beetee's sprinkled in here so intensely. These butterflies with mini tasers in their stingers aren't Haymitch's first experience with being tasered. Peacekeepers used them on him after the reaping. He didn't call it a taser then, but a couple times in the Capitol, Haymitch says that the peacekeepers had tasers on them to use on the tributes. When Haymitch had resisted getting on the train, trying to reassure Sid, he got a jolt of electricity that made him go limp. It stands out that the butterfly stings don't leave any trace. I think the reason for that is because the game makers wanted to have the ability to use these mutts to non-lethally punish tributes and get away with not showing it on camera without confusing the audience. If these stings left Haymitch with big welts everywhere, the audience would want to know how he got them. But since he's left visibly unscathed, the Capitol can avoid showing him running off with Lulu's body without creating plot holes in their show. Goody for them! The shocking butterflies could also be a reference to George Orwell's 1984. In the book, people resisting the regime are tortured with electric shocks. We know from Mockingjay the Capitol also does this to their prisoners. In the 50th Games recap in Catching Fire, Katniss noted that Haymitch has his own troubles over in the woods, where the fluffy golden squirrels turn out to be carnivorous and attack in packs, and the butterfly stings bring agony, if not death. Let's look out for those squirrels. And it sounds like some other tributes had run-ins with the butterflies and at least one died. Though this chapter, Haymitch does say they don't kill you when they sting, but that's just his experience. Maybe the game makers can control how intense the shocks are, so if they want to kill you with them, they can. Or Katniss could be using a figure of speech, like they could possibly kill you. After Katniss was stung by her arena's insect mutts, trackerjackers, one of the things she hallucinated before passing out was a butterfly that ballooned to the size of a house before shattering into a million stars. Sounds a lot like these lightning butterflies being lit on fire. In Mockingjay, she recounts the experience, saying she saw giant colored butterflies. She probably saw butterfly mutts in other games, and this was before she saw Haymitch's games. Another mention of butterflies is the magenta-haired lady Katniss shot in the Capitol. She may or may not be Effie's sister Proserpina, just based on hairstyle, but regardless, this woman's hair was decorated with gilded butterflies. So these would be golden butterflies, much like Haymitch's butterflies with golden lightning bolts on them. This next thing is a big reach. I don't really believe in this, but you could argue these mutts were fashion inspiration for these gilded butterflies. By the way, I know Effie wore that stunning McQueen butterfly outfit at the Reaping in the Catching Fire film, but she doesn't wear anything like that in the books, or if she does, Katniss never notices it. The only other mentions of butterflies in the series are figurative. Katniss thought how Deli looked as much like the redheaded Avox girl, aka Lavinia, as a beetle does a butterfly. And in Ballad during the Reaping, Corio thinks that Lucy Gray's colorful ensemble drew the eye as to a tattered butterfly in a field of moths. Since moths are close to butterflies, I looked into their references too. The phrase "like moths to a flame" is mentioned a few times in Ballad, so there's a little irony of Haymitch flaming the mutt butterflies. In the 74th Games, Katniss sees an exquisitely beautiful green and silver moth landing on her wrist before passing out, which was after she injected Peeta with the medicine for his blood poisoning. So for Katniss, she sees butterflies and moths before passing out in these instances where she and Peeta saved each other's lives. Since with the Trackerjacker butterfly situation, Peeta told her to run and he stayed and fought Cato when she was in her venomous haze, and then she sees that moth after getting the medicine Peeta needs because of the wound he got fighting Cato. In her butterfly hallucination, she also saw tiny orange bubbles, and orange is Peeta's favorite color, and the moth was green and silver, and green is her favorite color, and she has silver eyes. It's not really important, but it matters to me, okay? Moving on to Cole clothes. The way Haymitch's fireproof shirt reacts to the gas plant flames sounds a lot like Katniss and Peeta's chariot outfits in the third quell. Haymitch says his shirt front glows for a few moments like a bed of coals, then returns to black. Here's how Katniss describes seeing her black outfit change when turned on. A soft golden light, but gradually transforming to the orange-red of burning coal. I look as if I have been coated in glowing embers. Know that I am a glowing ember straight from our fireplace. The colors rise and fall, shift and blend, in exactly the way the coals do. I do not see a girl or even a woman, but some unearthly being who looks like she might make her home in the volcano that destroyed so many in Haymitch's quell. Shut up. I cannot believe that description was right there. Suzanne, you genius. And of course, Haymitch's fire-resistant outfit foreshadows that volcanic eruption. Wedging open doors. The way Haymitch kept the Mutt portal wedged open made me think of the bunker in District 13. The way it goes in Mockingjay, the book, not the movie, they're different, is Katniss runs to the closing metal doors and she jams her hand through the crack when it's nearly closed, only a few inches left. The officials slide open the doors a little more and then Katniss stays there so they don't close it until Prim, Gale, and Buttercup get to the door. She's using herself as a wedge. Haymitch also barely got to that sliding door in time to wedge it open by jamming a branch in there. Does anyone else care about that? Keep me posted. Joining the careers. Little thing, but a despicable thought crosses Haymitch's mind that Maisie has somehow joined up with the careers. He quickly abandons the idea and notes how helpful she'd been to the newcomers. Whatever else she may be, Maisie Donner is not a turncoat. This reminded me of Katniss's reaction to seeing Peeta with the career pack. She was disgusted and thinks all of his nobility and kindness was an act. But once she knows he was putting on a show for the careers, she feels awful for doubting him. Notable quotes. This was haunting. Whoever Lulu was, she's moved on. Her slight, starved frame lies quiet, finally beyond the capital's reach. Some more of Haymitch's thoughts on Lulu. So where will you go, little girl? Back to 11? Into capital soil? Or will they incinerate your body and leave no trace of you behind? Either way, mine will be the last touch of someone who cares about you. The thought of capital hands disposing of her infuriates me. And like my Luella, I cannot give her up without a fight. That's really cool. I totally feel fine about that, and it's normal, and I'm normal about it. Next quote is about the arena. Every sense is being catered to, every element designed to soothe. We're cocooned in soft pleasures as we face our deaths. This is making me think of Twilight. Everything about me draws you in. Next is an exchange between Haymitch and Ampert, but I can't promise to keep you safe from the game makers. Ampert laughs a bit. What a funny thing to say. Who could? Very eerie, especially from a 12-year-old. That is it for Chapter 17. On to Chapter 18. Recap. It's the third night of the games, and Ampert and Haymitch are camped out by the Butterfly Bush Mutt portal. Ampert makes an excuse for the game maker's benefit that he's staying the night with Haymitch to avoid walking back to the newcomers in the dark. It's confirmed that the tribute uniform shirts aren't the only things made of fire-resistant material. Socks are too. Then Ampert starts prepping the explosion materials under the guise of creating a rabbit snare. He unwinds his own token, and the woven cord of the necklace is the fuse, and the blasting cap is hidden inside. And he takes off the District 9 explosive sunflower tokens too, since they're conveniently tangled up with his token. Ampert gives Haymitch one of the 2 sunflower tokens, saying he thinks the District 9 kids would have wanted him to wear one of these blood-stained tokens since he brought them into the Alliance. Ampert is a spectacular liar, truly. So Haymitch has everything he needs to complete the plan now, and the arena sky reveals that nobody died that day. They stay by the fire, and Haymitch agrees to take first watch while Ampert rests. This little genius covertly holds onto a big mouthful of water and uses it to soften up the sunflower. Remember, Beatty said they would need to wet them with water and rub them between their palms to dissolve the shellac coating and mush up the explosive. Ampert pretended to be asleep. He must have curled up to conceal what he was doing with his hands, or maybe he tucked it all under his shirt. It worked. Haymitch waits until around midnight to get the plan going, since the audience has gone to bed, leaving a handful of game makers to mind the show. He lights a torch, and Fake wakes up Ampert saying, "Hey buddy, let's beat those odds." Hey, so actually I'm sick. Ampert hands him the coiled fuse and the explosive putty he shaped into a block. Haymitch will have 60 seconds to get the hell out of Dodge after he lights this fuse. They go to the portal, and Haymitch uses his spear to pry the sides of the berm apart. It takes some effort, but he's able to wedge in the spear to hold the hatch open wide. To one side, a utility ladder runs down into the depths. Just Haymitch will go down there, leaving Ampert alone by the hatch. He looks so young, standing there in the flickering light. Armed only with an axe I doubt he's strong enough to wield. I slide my knife into his belt, muss his hair like I do Sid's, and say, "Best ally ever." Haymitch goes all the way down the ladder with his torch and quickly finds the water tank, at first mistaking it for a wall. It has tear-shaped water droplets stamped into it. He's shocked at how big this tank is, and he can't figure out where the most effective point to place the explosive would be, so he just slaps it on where he's standing and lets it rip. I dip my torch to the end of the fuse, watch the flame eat through the first inches, leaving only the faintest trace of ash, and run like hell. He tries to keep a countdown of his remaining time, time as he escapes, and right when he gets to the ladder and sees Ampert's face overhead, rainbow bat mutts descend upon him! Ampert tosses Haymitch a new torch, but the fire doesn't do much to deter the bats. They claw Haymitch's shoulders, back, and thigh, drawing blood. He keeps trying to climb, though he loses hope he'll get out of there before the explosion. Thinking fast, he unclasps his handy-dandy shirt belt and secures it around a ladder rail, hanging on for dear life and taking in a big breath for the impending flood. But after 5 seconds, the explosion doesn't come. He worries he messed up the bomb or a game maker interfered with it, and then boom, it goes off. He's submerged in water and barely keeps hold of the ladder. When the water calms a bit, he unclips himself and climbs. Right before he's gonna pass out from lack of oxygen, he surfaces from the water. The bats are gone. They probably drowned. Conveniently, the water is not poisoned, so Haymitch is okay despite swallowing a bunch of it. Not gonna lie, this feels a little like plot armor. The reason Haymitch gives makes sense, but it's pretty convenient. He figures the game makers didn't bother to poison that colossal tankful, but targeted the streams individually. So the water he drank and his mutt wounds have been washed clean safely. How do you feel about this moment? I'm pretty forgiving in terms of plot armor, but this it was a little annoying. Moving on. Haymitch is still underground, and he can't see Ampert above him anymore. He calls his name, but there's nothing. Something isn't right. Haymitch worries the bats escaped the wave and came for him, or careers or game makers got to him. Their campsite is puzzlingly undisturbed, and Haymitch calls out for Ampert. No response. There's a strange chattering sound in the distance. Haymitch follows it, bringing his hammock to use as a net if needed. He comes to a clearing with a tree of swarming golden squirrel-like creatures, their eyes shining as if lit from within. Cute in a way, but too hyper, bouncing from branch to branch, gnashing their long rectangular front teeth in agitation. Mutts. They only pause to emit piercing rodent screams at a mound of their comrades in the center of the clearing. They're kicking each other away from this mound, fighting for access. One is thrown off and lands at Haymitch's feet. There's a bloody scrap of electric blue fabric snagged on its incisors, and everything becomes clear. Carnivorous mutts, tearing Ampert apart. Not my buddy. Oh goody, we found those carnivorous golden squirrels Katniss was talking about. Desperate to end Ampert's suffering, Haymitch lunges at the pile of squirrels, using his hammock like a snare. There's a lot of them. He describes pulling off a layer or two of mutts, and there's still more. He uses his spear like a club, swinging it across the mound again and again, sweeping the squirrels away. They are uninterested in Haymitch. They don't attack him at all. Haymitch realizes these are programmed for Ampert and Ampert alone. His look, his smell, his taste. I am losing. I am losing the fight. I am losing him. I know this, but there's nothing to do but keep swinging. I never even get a glimpse of Ampert, just writhing furry bodies fighting for a piece of him. Finally, as if someone blew a whistle audible only to them, hundreds of heads pop up and turn in unison toward an unseen master. A mad dash ensues, and in seconds, the squirrels have vanished into the foliage. All that is left of Ampert is a small white skeleton stripped clean to the bone. No flesh or clothing remains. Just his axe and Haymitch's knife on either side, plus his tracker that was in his arm. Haymitch silently mouths, "Buddy, stop." The cannon fires. Haymitch howls with grief and rage. He wants to kill them all. Snow, the game makers, every person in the capital who has been party to this atrocity. And then he picks up the axe and starts swinging it at everything he sees, trying to chop the arena to pieces. Then there's what seems like an earthquake. It knocks Haymitch off his feet, and he grabs onto some moss so he isn't thrown around anymore. The shaking comes to a stop, and he's temporarily elated, running around shouting, "I'm still here!" He thought the game makers meant to crush him with a falling tree or something with that earthquake. The arena is going haywire. The mutt portal he'd opened is jolting open and closed as it spits out flowers. Mutt baby deer are running around. Blue sparks come out of an apple tree. The stream is steaming. The sky cuts in and out like bad television reception. Everything's taken on an eerie, dreamlike quality. Either the arena's malfunctioning or Haymitch has been licking toads like Magno. For a moment, the force field glitches out. There's fresh air and moonlight, and Haymitch joyously thinks they've broken the arena. He's painted his epic poster. He dances around in a sudden thunderstorm and sings "The Goose and the Common," since the people have gotten the common back. This lightning is very end of the third quarter Quill. As he falls to his knees and stretches out his arms to embrace the sky, it goes pitch black, as suddenly as if someone threw a switch. And then the arena sky is back. Haymitch hopes this is all just part of the shutdown. To figure out what's happening, he climbs a tree and looks through his binoculars. Far in the distance, beyond the meadow, the mountain erupts in a fountain of lethal gold. And I have my answer. For me, the party is over. It's just as Katniss saw on day 4 of the game's recap. The mountain erupts in a volcano. End of chapter 18 and part 2, The Rascal. Part 3 is The Poster. Character analysis. Haymitch. He goes on a harrowing emotional roller coaster this chapter. We have 2 instances now of Haymitch trying to end the suffering of the dying. It would mess you up so badly to be in these situations of not being able to save anyone, and the best you can do is mercy kill them. He only had to do that for Lulu, but still, poor Haymitch. His rage at the Capitol is a lot more intense than Katniss's was after Rue died. She wanted to hold them accountable, but Haymitch has witnessed 3 little kids die by this point. He's over trying to hold the Capitol accountable. He wants them dead. The way Haymitch's rage is described has some of that humanity and civility theme to it. He emits a howl and inhuman sounds roar out of him. It's an interesting moment to use that type of language. I know it's common to describe crying that way, but stay with me. Haymitch is reacting to the game maker's monstrous, inhuman behavior. And when Haymitch momentarily taunts them, he careens through the trees like a wild man. The way this is written, it's how Haymitch sees himself. He thinks he's acting uncivilized, and I guess he is, but it's all a reaction to other people acting like beasts. Ampert. Rest in peace, buddy. I never would have guessed nothing but his bones would be left. Like, what the hell was that? Amber is a hero. He did not deserve that. But that's the point, right? Reading about his death was such a different experience than Lulu's. They're both equally gut-wrenching, but I felt total shock with Ampert. Like the wind got knocked out of me. Even when it was clear he was going to be found dead or nearly by Haymitch, I didn't anticipate anything like this. I keep having to force myself not to picture this happening to Ampert. It is so awful. We'll talk more about Ampert in the other sections, don't worry. The game makers and Snow. It's important to think of what is going through the game makers and Snow's heads throughout all of this. So here's where I'll ponder their intentions behind what's going on in the arena. The Batmutts are well suited for attacking Haymitch in this environment since they're small and can fly around. They are sinewy mammals that can turn on a dime. It's also possible these mutts were just nearby the area Haymitch was in, so they sent them over right away. As for the squirrels they set on Ampert, I'd say these were chosen since it's an especially torturous way to go. The game maker's purpose for having Ampert in the games was always to punish Beetee, so they thought the best way to do this was to have a 12-year-old child be eaten alive by hundreds of tiny mouths and leaving no body for him to bury, just pearly white bones. Like Lucy Gray said about what she had left of her mom back in 12. She used that same phrase. We don't know how involved Snow is in these decisions. It's possible he's in the game-making control room thing. Maybe he specifically chose these mutts here. However it shook out, you're monsters! All of you! When the arena is on the fritz from the explosion, do we think the cameras are still working? I think some are, but not all. There's plenty of other tributes they could have the cameras on if they were still staying live, just not focusing on what Haymitch and Ampert were doing once they saw he was going down the hatch. Or maybe they turned off all the cameras after they went down the hatch, but before the ground started shaking. Or maybe they cut the entire live feed of the games after Ampert died, but before the ground started shaking. But I'm sure they still had cameras on Ampert while they were doing that to him after he was gone, and there's this moment of the deer running around and all that. I can imagine the feed was either not working or they turned it off, but then they put it back on when, they got control back and they were making the mountain erupt. Or did they make the mountain erupt, or did it happen by accident? We don't know, but they did get control of the arena again, like the force field came back. So I'm curious what the mentors saw of all this. Even though we don't have the details of their setup, it makes sense that mentors can see way more camera angles than what's aired to the districts. I've always imagined they have access to like personal computers or some sort of screen where they can click around to the different camera feeds to keep an eye on their tributes. How much do you think the mentors saw of what happened here? Could they see Haymitch going down the Mutt portal? Did the game makers turn off the camera so they couldn't? Let me know what you think. Symbols and themes. 60-second explosion windows. I couldn't decide if this belongs here or in series connections, but it's going here, I guess. It's a cool link here with Haymitch having 60 seconds to get to safety after lighting the fuse, and at the start of these modern era games, tributes have to stand on their platforms through a 60-second countdown if they don't want to get blown up. I keyword searched 60 seconds in all 5 books, and aside from Haymitch's bomb leeway time, all of the mentions are about waiting on the platform at the start of the games. And the use of the words 1 minute are used in a variety of ways, so didn't include that. Next is water and tears. Tear-shaped water droplets are stamped along the water tank at about eye level. So tears at eye level. Love that. And it syncs up with Haymitch's desire to stop the Capitol from using his tears for their entertainment. This whole flood situation reminded me, again, of Alice in Wonderland. She cries so hard she ends up in a pool of her own tears. This is a quote from the original book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. "I wish I hadn't cried so much," said Alice as she swam about, trying to find her way out. "I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears." Haymitch knows he'll be punished for the flood he created as well, and he nearly drowns in it. The pool of tears. Bat mutts. Haymitch's first impression of these when he can only hear them is that they sound like unthreatening songbirds. A delicate chirping sound, not unlike a bird, overlaid with occasional squeaks. Whatever they are, they don't sound threatening. Perhaps a flock of songbirds has escaped and flies free in sub-A, like the birds do in the rafters of the chariot horse stable. Following with the deception theme of the arena, it seems these bats were created to catch their victims by surprise. Most of the mutts are, but still, Haymitch heard and saw actual songbirds in the arena already. Whether these are normal or mutts, we don't know, but bird chirping is a normal element of the soundscape of the arena. These mutts were intended to be used on screen, not in sub-A, so game makers could easily use these to catch tributes by surprise in the arena. They wouldn't notice anything amiss until they started attacking. This pack of colorful bats are reminiscent of the rainbow snakes in the 10th games. They fit much better in this arena than the bombed out one Lucy Gray survived. The bats have transparent wings tinted every color of the rainbow that catch the firelight, making them shine like hard candy in the Donner's shop window on a sunny day. It'd be something to admire, except each 3-foot wide pair of wings carries a vicious face and 2 back feet sporting 4-inch curved claws. Genetically engineered bat mutations, designed to shred me to slaw. This call out of the wings looking like the Donner's candy shop foreshadows what happens to Maisley from the recap in Catching Fire. She's attacked by a flock of candy pink birds. This mention of candy colored wings ties it together. I'm not sure if this means there's bats with blue wings and bats with pink wings, or the bats have multiple colors on their wings, like they're iridescent. I'm leaning towards iridescent multicolored. The snakes were similar, with skins almost glowing in shades of neon pink, yellow, and blue. Pairing rainbows with these mutts, once again, shows how the Capitol twists what is natural and beautiful into something horrific and deadly. I looked to see if anything else was described as having 4-inch claws like the bats, and the wolf mutts in the 74th games had claws that were 4 inches and clearly razor sharp. Onto bluebell flowers. The moment the earth starts shaking, Haymitch is hacking a berm of bluebells to bits. I think the symbolic reason these flowers were named here is because, as the name suggests, they are shaped like bells. It's like the game makers have sounded the alarms. The bells are ringing. Something big is about to happen. Also, it looks like in Disney's Alice in Wonderland, they had bluebell flowers, so it's on theme. And I checked the other books in the series. There's no bluebells mentioned. I want to delve more into the symbolic symptoms of the arena going haywire. Starting with the Mutt portal door, the mouth opens and closes spasmodically, sending bursts of blossoms into the air. Haymitch calling it the mouth is specific. He also referred to it as having a floral leer. So it's like the mouth of the Capitol. It's their jaws, back to jaws and claws. This plan is all about going up against the Capitol, and the biggest mouthpiece the Capitol has are these games. It's their ultimate propaganda platform. This rebel plot is messing with that mouthpiece, so it makes sense it's going open and closed. The Capitol is fighting to regain control of the narrative here on their TV show. And the fact that it's sending out these bursts of flowers makes me think of President Snow. I mean, his whole symbol is roses, and he's the Capitol mouthpiece. He's the president. He's the guy with the roses. It works. Then in the trees behind it, a herd of adorable baby deer runs around in a frenzy, rearing up to show spiked hooves, slashing viciously into the air. These mutts definitely fit with the theme of the arena, taking Bambi and giving her spiked hooves. That'd be awful. A baby deer killing you? Are you kidding? There's plenty of deer mentions in the trilogy. It's really just in relation to hunting. Katniss and Gale have hunted bucks and does, but there's no mentions of baby deer that I could find. However, there is one mention of a deer in the first Hunger Games book that feels connected to the situation in Sunrise. It's when the game makers were sending those fireballs at Katniss in the arena. There's flames and smoke, and she thinks, all I can do is follow the others, the rabbits and deer, and I even spot a wild dog pack shooting through the woods. I trust their sense of direction because their instincts are sharper than mine. She's following bunnies and deer, and there's a fiery explosion going on. Well, would you look at that? Rabbits have guided Haymitch a few times in this arena, and these baby deer are stampeding because they're spooked. Haymitch also noted an apple tree has transformed into a fountain of blue sparks. It sounds a lot like the lightning tree in the third quarter quell explosion. When it's all falling apart, Katniss notes the dome bursts into dazzling blue light. So we have blue sparks and blue light. There could also be some significance to these blue sparks coming from an apple tree. In Sunrise, they're linked to Lenore Dove because when Haymitch first met her and fell for her, really, she was up in an apple tree. And now we're seeing an apple tree on fire. It's ominous. Could be some possible foreshadowing. And lastly, clouds of steam rise from a nearby stream. This made me think of the 75th arena again. Katniss says it was so hot the air was turning into steam. Plus we also have the poison fog situation, which is kind of like steam. And a steaming river is very hellish. I also thought about how Ampert has this knife that Haymitch gave him. Katniss found Beetee on the ground with a knife trying to break the arena, and then Haymitch gave Ampert a knife and found it with his skeleton on the ground when they were trying to break the arena. Lore and world building. Education in 12. Well, the mystery is solved as to why the district stopped teaching students how to blow stuff up in the mines. No more hands-on training. Haymitch proved how valuable of a skill that is, and he used it against the Capitol. So I imagine once that stopped being taught in school and Haymitch was mentoring kids who missed out on that education, he felt especially horrible. Mutt recall. The way the squirrel mutts leave the scene at once aligns with what we saw in the trilogy. So this technology has existed in the Capitol for quite some time. In the 74th games, after Cato died, a mutt portal opens up, and as if on cue, the remaining mutts bound into it. In the 75th, after the monkey mutts mortally wound the morphling woman, they withdraw, backing up trees, fading into the jungle as if some unheard voice calls them away. A game maker's voice, telling them this is enough. So that tracks. Possible foreshadowing. Ampert's fate. Once again, Haymitch's faith in something happening is horribly misplaced. He trusted that Ampert will be waiting at the top with a second torch. I may still be able to offer him some protection. Guess not. It's far too late to protect him. Speaking of torches, I was poking around for other torch significance in the series and found something absolutely devastating in the trilogy. It's not Sunrise related, but it gutted me, and I'm talking about it now. There are two instances where Katniss uses the term human torch. First is when she and Peeta are waiting for Cinna to light their fire outfits, which gave her the Girl on Fire moniker. She's thinking this about Peeta: I guess we're both so nervous about the games and more pressingly petrified of being turned into human torches, we're not acting sensibly. The second time this term pops up is in Mockingjay, when she's recovering from the Capitol bombing. She thinks, Katniss Everdeen, the girl who was on fire. I wouldn't much care except the sight of my body brings back the memory of the pain and why I was in pain and what happened just before the pain started and how I watched my little sister become a human torch. torch. She became the girl on fire, a human torch, because she was trying to keep Prim alive, and then Prim died as a human torch. Suzanne, how do you do these things? That freaked me out. Back to Sunrise. This next thing, I think you could argue is foreshadowing for what happened with the squirrels a bit. So back in chapter 5, when Haymitch gets his body hair shaven off by the prep team, he thinks, I feel like a skinned squirrel, raw and exposed. I know this is an offhand simile, but Ampert, he's skinned by squirrels. I'm sorry. Even this chapter, when Haymitch goes up the tree with his binoculars, he says he's scurrying up the trunk like a squirrel mutt. So he's already making more similes about these squirrels. Series connections. Bombing the career supplies in the 74th games and the tank bombing of the 50th. Parallels between these, okay? What happened in this chapter with Haymitch and Ampert is so much like what happened with Katniss and Rue. In both situations, our 16-year-old protagonists embarked on missions that involved explosions with their 12-year-old allies who reminded them of their siblings. When Haymitch met Ampert, he describes him as a boy about Sid's size and talks to him because he hopes someone would be friendly to his brother under these circumstances. And that's just the first of many times that Haymitch says Ampert reminds him of Sid. Katniss's first impression of Rue is she's very much like Prim in size and demeanor, and she keeps going with the comparisons. The first night after Rue and Katniss teamed up, there were no tribute deaths. Same goes for Haymitch and Ampert. No deaths that day. When both Katniss and Haymitch returned from their explosion expeditions, they couldn't find their allies and did not see any sign of a struggle. By the time they reached them, it's too late. Also, Rue was killed by a spear, and Haymitch uses one to open up the portal, thinking, I'm glad that's its job instead of taking someone's life. Since so much is linked to Rue's situation here, the spear comment stood out to me. Katniss found Rue tangled up in a net on the ground right before she was killed, and Haymitch was carrying his hammock to use as a net as he went to find Ampert, and then he uses it to capture some of the squirrels and pull them off Ampert, who is on the ground. So both these kids are on the ground with nets over them. Katniss gets to say goodbye to Rue the way Haymitch wished he could with Ampert. He thinks, there's no one to comfort, to ease out of this world. Ampert's been swallowed up by the capital, and his coffin will hold only these pearly white bones. I'm thinking of Haymitch watching this whole thing play out with Katniss and Rue. That is a lot. Next is tunnel explosion madness. Haymitch's experience in Sub A also has some big parallels to being in the tunnels under the Capitol, the sewers. When Haymitch first goes down the tunnel ladder, he notes his feet feel stiff and clumsy on the thin rungs. Right, left, I instruct them. And later when he's climbing out of it, he goes, I scale the ladder as fast as my frozen muscles will allow. When Katniss starts climbing a ladder to get away from the lizard mutts in the sewers, she thinks, hands shoved against the rungs, ordered to climb, my wooden puppet limbs obey. Movement slowly brings me back to my senses. Very similar sensations here happening on these ladders, feeling stiff and disconnected from their bodies. What happens to Finnick in the sewers differs a bit from movie to book. There's not a lot of detail in the book of what's going on when he's fighting the lizard people. There is not that moment where he throws his trident at one, he's left unarmed. It's epic in the movie, but it's not in the book, so strike that from the record for literary analysis sake. In the book, Katniss can just make out Finnick, struggling to hang on as three mutts tear at him. As one yanks back his head to take the death bite, Katniss has this whole life flashing before her eyes moment, except it's Finnick's life, and then she drops the hollow and triggers it to explode to put him out of his misery. It's a they're too late, mercy kill situation. Overall, there's a lot of overlap here in this underground mud attack on a ladder situation. Like Katniss is using fire arrows to fight off the lizards, and then she ends the attack by triggering an explosion, like how Haymitch is using a torch to fight off his mutts, and then the attack ends with the water tank explosion. Our protagonists survive this, but their buddies do not. Another important difference here is in the movie, Katniss has a moment where she's fighting against the lizards underwater and she nearly drowns, but none of that happens in the book. It would be a really cool parallel if she was nearly drowning like Haymitch here, but it's not book canon. It starts at midnight. The rebel plot explosion plans for the second and third quarter quells happen around midnight of the third night, so the start of the fourth day. It's exactly midnight in the third, but here in the second, Haymitch thinks it's past midnight when he wakes up Ampert to blow things up. It's close. Rabbit fever. Little thing, but Haymitch mentions the possibility of contracting rabbit fever from eating raw or undercooked rabbits caught in the snare Ampert pretended to make, and Katniss had also brought up this concern in the 74th games. She caught a rabbit in her snare, but can't risk making a fire to cook it. She learned the hard way that eating raw rabbit can give you rabbit fever. Again, I'm sorry, this next part is not a Sunrise connection, but I noticed it when looking this up, and I have to say it. Katniss ended up cooking her rabbit with the leftover burning coals from the District 8 girl the Careers and Peeta killed. While it's cooking, she grinds up part of a charred branch from the fire, camouflaging her orange pack with ash. She thinks, the black tones it down, but I feel a layer of mud would definitely help. Of course, to have mud, I'd need water. Later, when she finds a pond, she carries out that plan with the mud. Stay with me here. Katniss gets a lot of help in the arena from this orange backpack. And orange, as we all know, is Peeta's favorite color. She and Peeta help and protect each other. It's their whole thing. Peeta's with the Careers and helped kill the girl from District 8 as part of this whole plan to help Katniss win the games. Then Katniss uses that girl's campfire to camouflage her backpack, helping her stay hidden. And Peeta epically camouflaged himself in the mud at the stream after he fought Cato the Career to help Katniss. That's some 3D symbolism foreshadowing chess right there. You can tell me I'm making this up and Suzanne didn't intend it, but I won't listen to you. Back to Sunrise. I talked a bunch about the dove gray rabbits in the previous video, and I noticed another relevant rabbit series connection to Ballad. This first meeting Corio has with Dr. Gall in the book, she's teasing a caged rabbit with a metal rod. It's been mutated to have a deadly strong jaw. Gall's first words of dialogue are hippity hoppity, like a rabbit, and she says this whole creepy rhyme, hippity hoppity, how was the zoo? You fell in a cage and your tribute did too. So there's a dark Dr. Gall link with rabbits in general. It's not a dove gray one as far as we know. When Corio fell into the monkey cage at the zoo, he sort of fell down a rabbit hole, and he did this with Lucy Gray at the start of his Covey Girl connection. Haymitch's arena dove-colored rabbits are tied to his Covey connection, Lenore Dove. Dove is a shade of gray. Lucy Gray. Dr. Gall is seen a few more times with the strong-jawed rabbit, usually feeding it carrots. I don't know, there's something there with our Covey girls and rabbits and capital threats. Next up, clawing Haymitch. The way he's attacked by these bats made me think of the way Katniss went after him after the third quell. When she's in the hovercraft and he tells her Peeta was captured, she rakes her fingernails down Haymitch's face, causing blood to flow and damage to one eye. The bats didn't attack his face, but still, they're clawing at him. On to notable quotes. This thought from Haymitch is really touching. I try not to be scared. I tell myself that everybody has to die sometime and my number's up. In a way, it's a comfort that a bunch of people I know have gone before me. Pa and Mama and the twins and Luella and Wyatt and Lulu and a lot of the newcomers. Maybe Lenore Dove's right and I will meet up with them and one day with her in another world. Or maybe there's just nothing, in which case it won't hurt any. Mostly, I just don't know. Another Haymitch thought, I know it might be wiser to embrace my death now, but there's something in a person that wants to live, even if it's only for a few more hours. Next quote is when Haymitch takes the spear from the berm entrance. The lips try to close, but damage has occurred, and they end in a sort of floral leer. I just really like floral leer. It's a malicious, creepy smile paired with the beauty of flowers. It represents the whole paradoxical arena. Could also be like Snow's leer, given his rose connection. It also made me think of a twisted version of the Cheshire Cat smile, like in Alice in Wonderland. A Cheshire smile isn't necessarily creepy, it's more mischievous and mysterious, but this isolated floral grin appearing is very Cheshire Cat. This next quote hurts. Somewhere, Beatty's heart breaks into fragments so small it can never be repaired. All right, that is it for chapter 18 and part 6 of the Ultimate Sunrise on the Reaping deep dive. I hope you enjoyed watching and don't mind that this video covers 2 chapters instead of 3. I'm trying to upload more frequently, so I need to do fewer chapters at a time to make that happen. Part 7 should be out in 2 weeks. I think this video is still going to end up being an hour long though. I have about the same amount of notes as usual. Rachel from the future will know. Again, if you have the means, I strongly encourage you to support food banks. They could always use more donations and volunteers. I have some resources linked in the description. Shout out to my Patreon friends. Thank you so much. It was really nice to hang out with you all in this month's live stream. And as always, thank you so much for watching. watching, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more Hunger Games analyses and do the thumbs up thing.